The sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs officially begins. The U.S. trade war is put on pause for now, and the 583-day nightmare for an American hostage in Gaza finally ends. I'm Elizabeth Vargas, and America's News starts right now.
Tonight, a male escort and former security guard are the first to take the stand in the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking trial, plus new information and images from that disturbing video of Combs allegedly assaulting his ex in a hotel. We've got the latest from the courtroom. Then, high drug prices are a problem. Did President Trump just write a new prescription?
Some prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 50 to 80 to 90%.
His latest executive order putting pressure on drug companies to cut drug prices and match those abroad. But does Trump have the authority to do it? And later, the last American is freed from the hands of Hamas, and his New Jersey hometown holds an emotional gathering to celebrate his return. The mayor of Tenafly joins me live.
Happy Monday, everybody. We begin in New York City, where the first day of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs federal criminal trial wrapped up at 5 p.m. today. The defendant was born Sean John Combs, but we first knew him as Puff Daddy, then P. Diddy. Now he's inmate number 374-52054 at the Metropolitan Detention Center in New York City. It will be up to 12 New Yorkers, 8 men and 4 women, picked today to decide whether he will face a stiff prison sentence or return to his lifestyle of the rich and famous. Prosecutors called 2 witnesses today and wasted no time showing damning video evidence against the 55-year-old Bad Boy Records CEO. It is footage from 2016 that shows Combs dragging and kicking his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, outside a hotel elevator in Los Angeles. Combs and his lawyers do not dispute that it is him in the video. Prosecutors showed the video while questioning a former hotel security guard who responded to that incident. He said Ventura had a purple eye and that Combs had a, quote, devilish stare. Police weren't called that day because nobody pressed charges. But the security guard testified that Sean Combs approached him with a wad of cash that he interpreted as a bribe. Now, Combs isn't charged with domestic violence documented in that video, but he is facing 5 federal charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. In opening statements today, prosecutors accused Combs of running a criminal enterprise, one that included rape, bribery, and freak-off sex parties. They said Combs expected to be treated like a king who was into kinky sex. And they said he got everything he wanted, using his fame, his power, and drugs to manipulate women into obscene sex acts that he videotaped and used as blackmail. The defense argued that all that freak-off sex was consensual. They said Combs is a very flawed man and that he has a bad temper, but that he is not a sex trafficker. His love of baby oil, that's not a federal crime. And neither is the domestic violence he seems to have committed against Cassie Ventura. That is a state crime. Sitting in the courtroom today to hear all the allegations, Diddy's mother and 6 children seated right behind him. He reportedly blew them a kiss as they sat in the courtroom. And as he waited for proceedings to begin, Combs sat reading the Bible. Let's go right now to NewsNation's Caitlin Becker, live for us outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Caitlin, prosecutors set that tone today with that violent video. They are setting up us seeing and the jury seeing Cassie Ventura, the star witness who may take the stand as soon as tomorrow.
That's exactly what we are expecting, Elizabeth. We thought maybe we would see Cassie Ventura today, but as we ended the day, a male escort remained on the stand. He has about an hour of testimony left tomorrow, and then we expect Cassie Ventura to be called. Her husband, Alex, was actually in the courtroom today. One of our producers, Ava, walked in with him in the middle of the day and said that he actually tried to go in the main gallery, the main courtroom, but was escorted out and then forced to go into the overflow room to hear some of this testimony. Now, as you detailed there, the testimony was very graphic, particularly when it came to some of his sexual escapades with Cassie and this particular male escort who was on the stand. I have to imagine tough to hear for Alex Fine. That's who you're seeing on the screen right there, Cassie's husband. Also tough to hear for Diddy's children. His 3 daughters at one point, when things got pretty graphic, had to get up and leave the room. They left the court and did not come back in until for the rest of the day. The 3 sons did remain in there. At one point after a break, Diddy locking eyes with one of his sons and kind of mouthing, "Are you okay?" He nodded yes. But, tough testimony. You were just looking at those shots there of the court sketches that depicted the video that they saw multiple times today. Diddy, it seemed to have a hard time looking at the video. When it played, at one point, he sighed pretty deeply. All of his children seemed to kind of look away again. So very much an intense day at court, but the jury was really prepared for it. They got these questions during voir dire. Are you okay with looking at this stuff, with talking about this stuff? So they were prepared for that. And the defense addressed it head on in their opening statements, even saying to the jury, you're probably not going to like Diddy by the end of this. You may think he's mean. You may think he's a jerk. You may see him committing crimes, doing drugs, but the things you may see him committing are not what he is on trial for. So they really did try to focus on that and hit out at some of the things the prosecution are going to say head on, saying, okay, yeah, we know that he was rich and famous and kind of did exactly what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it, but as long as it's consensual, it's not a crime. So, Elizabeth, all eyes tomorrow are certainly going to be on Cassie Ventura taking the stand. We know that her testimony is going to be likely through the end of the week, and it's going to be done in 90-minute increments because Elizabeth, she is basically ready to give birth. So she is going to take the stand very pregnant, and this is going to be the first time she and her ex, Sean Diddy Combs, are going to be in the same room for several years now, Elizabeth.
Yeah, it will be high drama in the courtroom for sure. Caitlin Becker, thanks so much. Let's go to our panel now. Jesse Weber is a NewsNation legal contributor and Law and Crime Network host. Claudia Colon is an attorney and jury consultant. And Derek Parker is a former New York City police officer, detective who headed up the special intelligence unit that focused on hip-hop crime. Great to have all of you here. Jesse, I want to start with you. The prosecution really came out of the gate with this very lurid testimony from this male sex worker who was paid to have sex repeatedly with Cassie Ventura. It was very explicit testimony, but also importantly, he said he witnessed Sean Combs being violent with Cassie Ventura in his presence.
It was brilliant to start this way. Why? A lot of people were saying Cassandra Ventura would be the first witness. You build up her credibility with other witnesses and other evidence before you call her to the stand. Remember when she filed her lawsuit back in November of 2023? Really wild allegations. A lot of people said, well, is she telling the truth or not? Hard to know. As soon as that video came out, and they started today with the 2016 video, it changed the whole game. Now, this is what's interesting about this case and the prosecution's perspective. They spent a lot of time today trying to convince the jury that this is a crime. This is not your standard garden variety sex trafficking or racketeering case. And because they spent so much time doing that, having the testimony of this man say, I saw him beat her, force her, direct her into these sex acts, it became so important to crystallize that for the jury on day one.
Yeah, Claudia, he really, this witness on the stand, it really set up a scenario where it didn't sound like she was a willing participant, where by the end of it, he was warning her, get away from him, you're in danger for your life. Where he thought his life was threatened, he said Sean Combs took a picture of his driver's license and kept it, and he thought that would be threatening to him. He said he was afraid for his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how the jurors react to what's happening. There's different things that are coming at play with this jury pool. It is a super diverse jury. That's a good thing for the defense. It's going to cause people to have diverse reactions to what they're seeing. So while it seems compelling to have that testimony, somebody saying that they feared for their own lives and that they warned the victim about their own life, we're going to have people who are going to still be looking for concrete evidence. They're going to want to see, okay, but what does the other side say?
Yeah.
You know, they're going to be asking those questions because of their backgrounds and their experiences. And we can get into more of detail in that.
Yeah. And the other thing, before I get to Derek, Jesse, the defense says and made the argument over and over again that, okay, what you're going to hear is kinky, it's weird, it's bizarre, you're not going to like it, you're not going to like him, but everybody involved was an adult and everybody involved consented.
That's the defense you go with, and they had to own up to a lot of what is bad evidence against them. But they're making the point, we're going to dissect every element of this. This is not racketeering. This is not sex trafficking. I will say, they may have a little difficulty arguing the transportation to engage in prostitution. The argument that I understood today was, I paid these workers, Combs paid these workers for their time and experience. I don't know about that one. I think that one's a little bit of a stretch if you ask me. But saying this wasn't bribery, this wasn't kidnapping, they have alternative explanations. And saying Cassandra Ventura, who's the main witness, she called the sex workers, directed it, paid, dressed up. That's going to be very key to their defense, that it was all on her.
Derek, how big an issue when they make this argument that she was there willingly is this video from the Intercontinental Hotel that shows, Sean Combs has not disputed it's him on this video, that shows him beating and kicking and dragging her by the hair. She is trying to leave at that point, and he is preventing her.
Well, they're trying to establish his behavior. They're trying to show that he has a violent tendency towards Cassie, who's the main person of this whole thing. And he's trying to point that out, that this is a behavior he has. Now, just to point out, that license that he took a picture of, that's twofold. One is because he may take the picture of the license to see who the individual was, so in case they come at him or sue him or come back with some legal defense later on, he knows who it is. The second is probably to intimidate or to know who that person was. So there's a twofold with that license that you just spoke about.
And also, Derek, we had the former security guard at the hotel who testified that Combs tried to bribe him by offering him a big wad of cash. He turned down the money. He did testify that it wasn't clear if the bribe was implied or stated outright.
Right, he didn't, according to his testimony, he didn't say that. But then he left out who the 7-foot person was that drove her away and who the person in the room was. Who were those people? You know, who are those people that might have witnessed this?
Right, but he said he didn't interact with them and they weren't engaging in that. So he was focused at the time on Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura, who at that point, despite what he described as having a black eye, did not want to press charges. Jesse, the prosecution will have to prove that Diddy's businesses were a front for a criminal enterprise in order to make this charge stick. I mean, as the defense said, you might really detest this guy by the end of this trial and hate him for what you see him doing on this video. But is that racketeering and sex trafficking?
There are a lot of concrete elements they have to prove. They have to prove a commercial sex act, transportation. They have to prove fraud, coercion, force. They have to prove that he used the resources of his business to further criminal liability. And by the way, the reason that evidence was so important today, bribery, it's a part of the racketeering charge. It's one of the underlying crimes they have to prove.
Yeah.
Again, juries, this is a complicated charge, and I do wonder if it's too complicated for the jury to ultimately move forward with this case.
All right, Claudia, tomorrow we see Cassie Ventura take the stand. She is the star witness. She was 19 years old when she started dating Sean Combs. He was the one who got her a record deal, gave her a record deal, and she had one hit. And she was with him for more than a decade. She is 9 months pregnant, and the defense is going to have to be very, very careful when they do their cross-examination of her.
That's exactly right. They are going to have to be surgical with the way that they question her, because not only is she a victim who's going to be testifying about very traumatic events that she's alleging here, she's obviously going to become emotional. And the fact that she's 9 months pregnant is going to make her that much more empathetic for jurors, especially parents, women on the jury, who we have a lot of. We have 4 women on the jury. We have many parents as well. They're going to have to be very careful.
I wonder how many of the men might have daughters, for example.
Yeah, I think there's 2 who have daughters.
Sisters,
yeah.
wives, yeah.
Exactly. Grandmothers, everything, you know. Particularly those jurors are going to be very impacted by that and very persuaded, you know, if it comes across too aggressive from the defense. If that defense, you know, makes her too upset, because the defense is going to be that she was also violent with Diddy. So they have to be very careful about how they elicit that testimony.
Jesse, how are they going to do that with this 9 months prior? It just feels like that's a really difficult thing for Sean Combs's lawyers to argue, that she was violent too, especially when, again, on that videotape, that hotel security, you never see her fight back. Not once.
No, and look, I think that's the text messages, right, that they're going to focus on the defense, say, look what she was communicating to these sex workers. Let's look at the receipts. What were the accounts? I will tell you this much, from a practical point of view, her being pregnant's a problem. The victim number 3 in this case is unavailable. They can't find victim 3 right now. If they lose victim 1, practically, can the prosecution move forward? If she gives birth or something happens in the middle of her case, what are we talking about here? Can the prosecution even move forward with the case against Sean Combs?
Oh, my God.
Right? Think about that. Victim 3, they can't find. Victim 3, that wasn't even mentioned in opening statements today. They're having trouble contacting this person. What are they going to do if victim 1 has a problem?
Derek, what do you think happened to victim number 3, given the fact that the reason Sean Combs is in jail right now, awaiting trial and now in trial, is because the court ruled that there was a high likelihood he would try and intimidate witnesses. Suddenly, one of the star witnesses at the very last minute has vanished.
Well, this is not uncommon in cases like this. That person probably got cold feet and didn't want to really testify or probably be involved to be out in this case, because that person is going to be identified and they're going to be questioning him or her. So the prosecution is definitely going to have a tough time now trying to relocate that witness if they haven't located that witness already.
Very quickly, Claudia, you say it's not a mistake that the 6 children of Sean Combs were sitting right behind him, so the jurors could see them.
That's absolutely right. As I said on Friday, for our viewers that weren't watching, this is the theater. Everything that they do in the courtroom is being observed by these jurors. So they have to be very methodical in how they present him, how they present his family, the sympathy that his family has for him, their love for each other. That's all part of the story. He's one of us, is what they're trying to say. He's not this celebrity on a pedestal. And, with that narrative, maybe he had a salacious sex life, but can they meet the elements of the crimes at issue?
And he's reading the Bible today.
And he was reading the Bible. That's right.
I don't know. Theater, maybe? Authentic. Who knows? All right, Jesse Weber, Claudia Colon, Derek Parker, thank you all so much for starting us off. Coming up for us, President Trump and China reach a temporary deal to slash tariffs. It's good news for your 401k. But is the trade war really over? And did the United States get anything for all of this? We're live at the White House with more. And then later... An emotional reunion between a mother and son. The last known living American hostage is released by Hamas. I'll speak live to the mayor of his hometown, where they have a huge celebration going in just a bit. Well, financial markets are roaring back tonight, fueled by a tariff-slashing shot of adrenaline. This after China and the U.S. agreed to a semi-ceasefire in their trade war. The two sides tapping the brakes on the punishing tariffs each side imposed on the other last month. The news sent markets soaring. The S&P 500 surged 3.26%. All 3 indexes were having their best day since April 9th. That was so-called Liberation Day, when President Trump imposed all these punishing trade tariffs, including 145% on China. Now, China and the U.S. have now agreed to a 90-day slash on tariffs. The U.S. is cutting its rate on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%. China, in return, is cutting its rate on American goods from 125% to 10%. President Trump applauded the agreement today, which came after weekend talks in Switzerland between Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and China trade representatives.
The talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us.
Now, the tariffs had escalated over the last several months, bringing nearly $600 billion in two-way trade between the two countries close to a standstill and fueling fears of a global recession. The pause will begin Wednesday. Both the U.S. and China will continue negotiations to try and reach some more permanent solution. So now we know what this means for people's retirement accounts in the very short term, but what does it mean for the administration's broader long-term economic and geopolitical agenda? We're joined now by Caleb Silver, editor-in-chief of Investopedia, and Julia Manchester, national political reporter at The Hill, who's live from the White House lawn. Julia, I'm going to start with you. Trump repeatedly said he would not lower tariffs on China without concessions. Today he did. What happened?
Yeah, and Democrats are certainly pointing that out. Look, there was a lot of pressure, I think, on President Trump to somehow make some sort of a deal. We kept on saying, hearing President Trump saying that we're going to feel some short-term pain, but in the long term, it's going to get better. But we saw over a month passing, and the president really couldn't, point to any results from these tariffs. I mean, of course, there was the trade deal with the United Kingdom last month, but the United Kingdom and the U.S. aren't as big of trading partners as the U.S. is with China. So this is certainly something he can point to. But the question is, what happens after these 90 days? We do know that Scott Bessent and Jamieson Greer, the trade representative for the United States, will be meeting with Chinese officials over this period of time. But, we don't know if they're necessarily going to make a trade deal. And we know that Democrats are certainly saying that we're essentially just back to square one. We don't have a long-term trading deal at the moment.
Right. We're right back where we were when he started this whole thing on Liberation Day by imposing these massive tariffs. And I think everybody agrees that something needed to change with China and the United States in trade. The problem is we still haven't gotten anything despite going through what we all went through for the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, there still aren't really any real results. We see, obviously the market's rallying right now. Clearly they like this, but we're still seeing, prices for now are going to continue to be high. I think there's a fear that, shipping costs and freight costs could be high as well as companies look to sort of catch up on those backlogs, from those tariffs and try to make the best out of these 90 days. So there's a lot of questions going forward. And I would say a lot of political pressure, not only for the Chinese, but obviously for President Trump and the Republican Party. We know that a number of Republicans on Capitol Hill have been pressuring President Trump over these tariffs, concerned about their impacts on inflation and the rising prices, of goods and services here in this country. So President Trump in no way out of the woods yet.
All right, Caleb, relief everywhere today, at least on the stock market. Stocks rebounding back to the levels that they were pre-Liberation Day. Great news for everybody's 401ks, for their IRAs, for our college funds. But what does this mean for prices on goods? Because we were already seeing a dramatic drop in ships arriving from China with goods. We had the CEOs of all these retailers saying we're going to have empty shelves in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, you still have a 30% tariff on a lot of products, and there's some 6,000 other products are subject to various tariffs, plus that 30%, 20% fentanyl tariff that was put in place. So we still have tariffs, just not to the extreme that we thought we were facing, and this is a 90-day reprieve. So it does give companies a chance to reset and say, okay, what will actual costs be for the products we need to import? What does that mean in terms of having to raise those prices to pass them on to consumers, and how much can we raise them before consumers just stop buying them? So we already saw some demand destruction in some sectors, but if you look at all the things we import, we're talking about sector-specific things like steel and aluminum. Those are still subject to 25% imports. Clothing and apparel, those have high import tariffs.
But we were hearing all sorts of oh my God, back to school, and we're not going to be able to buy our kids backpacks, and Christmas, we're not going to be able to buy Christmas trees or Christmas ornaments. Is that now, or what? Maybe that still might happen?
No, I still think we're going to be able to get goods in, but the supply chain has been severely disrupted. You talked about...
So they're going to be more expensive.
They're going to be more expensive. There might be delays in getting things, or it could be a scramble to order things ahead of the 90-day deadline on the trade talks right now. So that could be an issue, but don't forget, a lot of companies stopped their supply chains dead stop during these tariff wars, and now they have to restart them. That's never easy.
What about a recession? We have been hearing many people, well-respected business leaders, bank leaders, financial, experts saying we're going to have a recession.
Yeah.
does that make that a little less likely?
Yeah, the odds are much more reduced. And if you listen to economists on Wall Street and beyond, they're saying, okay, maybe that's off the table right now. Maybe we went from a 35-40% chance to a 10 to 15% chance.
Yeah.
But stagflation is certainly something that we're facing right now, which is slowing growth and rising prices due to the tariffs that we know are coming our way.
Julia, super quick. President Trump said today he's going to speak personally with Chinese President Xi later this week. Do we know what they're discussing? He seemed to hint at we're going to be working on something.
Yeah, look, I mean, we would assume they would be talking about this deal, what a long-term agreement could look like for the two nations going forward. But, as you've seen throughout this process leading up to today, Elizabeth, I think both sides are really keeping their cards close right now because so much is at stake.
All right, Julia Manchester, Caleb Silver, there is so much at stake in all of this. Anyway, glad to see the market recover today. Coming up for us, President Trump makes a big announcement, taking on Big Pharma. Could his plan lower U.S. drug prices, and will it actually work? And keep money in your pocket. We're breaking down the numbers coming up next. Nearly half of all Americans rely on prescription drugs for their health issues. So could President Trump's new executive order actually save money on medication? Today, the president ordered big pharma companies to slash prices on some of their medicines. The policy encourages these corporations to offer a price equal to the cost of the same drug in other countries, which is often much cheaper there. If the big pharma companies don't willingly comply, Trump will order Health and Human Services Department to explore other policies to bring the prices down.
Some prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 50 to 80 to 90%. Big Pharma will either abide by this principle voluntarily or will use the power of the federal government to ensure that we are paying the same price as other countries.
Now, Americans pay significantly more for prescription drugs compared to what people in other developed nations spend. We spend up to 10 times as much on insulin and over 4 times as much on branded drugs. Take, for example, the popular weight loss drug Ozempic. It can cost it's about $1,000 in the United States, but the same drug is sold in Canada for $155 and only $59 in Germany. Pharma stocks actually rose today in relief as Wall Street was worried that the president would actually propose legislation, which could have been more severe. So does this new executive order really mean anything? Does it mean you'll be spending less and saving more on your medications? And what does it mean for all the massive research and development that's required to bring any of these new drugs to the market? Joining me now is Bill Solomon, former pharmaceutical executive and CEO of the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs. So this executive order basically asks drug companies to voluntarily lower their prices. Can President Trump force them to do that?
Absolutely not. And in his first administration, he tried to do this.
He tried.
It was blocked by a federal judge. The issue really with this executive order is it's missing a lot of details, right? So it's a lot of bark and no bite from my perspective, because in the end of the day, you not only got to get the pharma companies to agree, but you've also got to get, in the other countries, get them to agree to tell you what the retail price is. There's actually nothing to force them to do that, right? So for a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, there's very little incentive, obviously, to do that, and it's very little that's going to be able to make them be enforced to do that.
Why
right?
do the big pharma companies charge Americans so much more than they charge the Brits or the Canadians or the Germans?
A big reason is the pharmacy benefit managers. We call them the middlemen. The pharmacy benefit managers negotiate drug pricing, rebates, discount on behalf of the health insurers. So, for example, if you're a company that makes Ozempic, right? Ozempic could be put on a particular tier in the formulary for the insurance company, and based on that negotiation by the PBM, where it's put in that tier, that determines the price, the copay, and how much reimbursement you're going to get.
Okay, but in other countries, what happens is the government actually negotiates directly with the pharmaceutical company for a price for all of the citizens of their country. So the leaders of Great Britain negotiate a price for Ozempic in Great Britain that is $93 for Ozempic, while in the United States, we're relying on this middleman who is sticking us with a price that's in excess of $1,000 for the exact same dose of the drug.
Yeah, that's basically what's happening, right? These middlemen are forcing pharma manufacturers to have to hike up the price. Remember, for a pharmaceutical company, they have to make the bulk of all of their profit before the patent life expires and runs out. So for these pharmaceutical companies, they're being forced in a lot of ways to have to hike up the price to make up for the rebate they have to give back to the pharmacy benefit manager.
So we're basically, American citizens are funding the research and development that these companies, and the profits that these companies make off these drugs, and that everybody else doesn't have to pay for.
Pretty much, absolutely. The other thing, too, that's important is that in the other countries, part of the equation that the pharma company calculates, right, in their mind, and I worked in the pharma industry for many, many years, is what will the market bear? They know very well that certain markets will bear a certain cost and other markets will bear a higher cost. So that's factored into the pricing model, unfortunately.
Every
right?
business does that, though.
Exactly,
You charge more for the same item in
That's
New
right.
York City than you do in Wichita, Kansas, because you can sell it here for more money. Okay, here's the question. There are some... The drug companies do argue there are some advantages to, believe it or not, us paying more. One of the advantages, they say, is we get access to a lot more drugs than people in Europe or Canada or other countries buying the drugs do. We get it faster than people in those countries do.
Right.
So we don't have to wait as long, and we have a greater ability to buy medications that we may want than people in other countries do. I mean, we've all, yes, Ozempic's a lot cheaper in Great Britain, but you might have to wait 9 months to get it.
Right. Yeah, so this is really important. In the United States, you do have better access, you have better care overall versus other developed countries. But remember, the #1 reason for care delay in America is prior authorizations. Many patients today, they get denied services, treatment. They have to go through a lot of roadblocks and hurdles to get access to these medications. We were talking about GLP-1 agonists, all the weight loss drugs. Many of those weight loss drugs, you have to get a lot of prior authorization. You have to do a lot of things first before you're even eligible for those drugs. That's an important consideration. It's not that easy. And remember, for this particular executive order, the impact is really on Medicare.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
It's Medicare, who are Americans over 65 on Medicare, not anybody else under. So he was just promising in that sound clip he would lower the price of drugs for people on Medicare by 50 to 90%.
Right.
First of all, is that feasible? And second of all, what does that mean for all the rest of us?
Here's the thing. In the United States, over half of the population, they get their insurance through what? Through their employers. It's private insurance. So for the rest of us, it's not going to actually make much of a difference. Right?
No money savings?
No, actually, there could be a higher copay because the pharma company may offset the loss of revenue on the Medicare side, which is about 20% of the country.
By charging all the rest of us more.
Exactly, yeah. So, and remember, most of those patients that are on Medicare, the elderly patients, they're taking generic drugs. Generic drugs, on average, they average in the United States about $20 on average. So even if you were to reduce the price by 50%, the savings is still minimal overall, right? So I think this is important to kind of keep in mind. Again, I think a lot of details are still missing from the executive order.
The headline sounds very, very good.
Yes,
when
it
you
sounds
dive
great.
a little bit deeper, that it becomes a little less clear. All right. Bill, great to have you on the show. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up for us, the last known living American hostage taken by Hamas 583 days ago is finally free tonight. I'll speak live with the mayor of Tenafly, New Jersey, hometown for Aiden Alexander, and how the entire hometown is celebrating his return. Wow, cries of joy, tears of relief as Aiden Alexander's mother and father embraced their son, held for more than 580 days by Hamas terrorists. Aiden was the last living American hostage to be released. He was just 19 years old when he was kidnapped on October 7th, 2023. He spent 2 birthdays in captivity. Just a day ago, Hamas announced it would release Aiden after several days of talking directly with representatives of the United States. This video shows the moment Aiden returned to the custody of the IDF after being escorted to them from Gaza by the Red Cross. It was a stunning turn of events. Remember, Hamas had just told the world a few weeks ago that it had lost contact with the group holding Aiden. Despite that, his family never lost hope. not even when negotiations for a peace deal and a hostage release stalled time and time again. I discussed that with Eidan's father, Adi, just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm in touch with Steve Witkoff all the time. What we understand that everything is stuck and the hostage is in a limbo, which is not a perfect situation as you can imagine. So we urge everybody to go back to the bargaining tables.
Oh my God, Eidan? Eidan?
Now, that was the moment Special Envoy Steve Witkoff handed his phone off to Eidan's mother. Remember, Witkoff was instrumental in securing Eidan's release. And this is footage of the moment Eidan's mother takes the phone from Witkoff, assuring her son that he was, in fact, now safe as he made his way to them in an IDF convoy. Shortly thereafter, of course, the emotional reunion Eidan's mother has, I'm sure, dreamt of for nearly 600 nights. All this as celebrations broke out in Tel Aviv. Crowds gathered in the city's Hostage Square chanting Eidan's name. And in Eidan's hometown of Tenafly, New Jersey, more crowds, hundreds deep, in anticipation of his return home. The mayor of that town, Mark Zinna, joins us now. Wow, the shot of those crowds gathering to celebrate, this is quite a day.
It was just, it was unbelievable, Elizabeth. It was just fantastic. The crowd started gathering at about 4:30 this morning.
Wow.
And we started off with about 1,000 people, and at the height, we had about 2,000 residents and people from neighboring towns come and celebrate. It was just magnificent. And there were a few ups and downs today, but everyone maintained hope and prayer, and he's with his family, and that's really all that matters in the end.
You know, we've seen other hostages released and come out of captivity in Gaza. Some of them have looked really terrible. There had to be that moment, you know, when everybody was watching, was sort of holding their breath, wondering what condition would Eidan be in.
Well, that's correct. You know, I'm not a doctor, and I think he was in better shape than we were expecting him to be in physically. But you know, this young man has gone through a lot of trauma over a long period of time, and I'm sure he has wounds that none of us understand. So, you know, we're going to continue praying for him and his family and for his recovery, and we're looking forward to him being back in Tenafly.
Yeah, I'm sure he's looking forward to being back in Tenafly, too. Do you know Eidan and his family at all? I mean, anything about their role in the community?
So, yes, I know them both. They're magnificent people. They're fully engaged in the community. They have been tireless advocates for their son and their family over the past 580 plus days. And they've traveled back and forth to Israel. They are out there. They are part of the community, a big part of it. I spoke to his dad, Eidan's dad, last night as he was heading to the airport to go to Israel. And, you know, it's a tough situation. You know, what do you say to these parents? And what we do is we just offer them hope and prayer, and they're just wonderful people. Many of
Eidan's high school friends still live in Tenafly. He had just graduated high school, was taking a gap year. His dad has been on this show to talk to me many times since he was taken hostage. What do his friends, what do you as a town have planned for when he does finally get on that airplane and come back home to New Jersey?
Well, you know, people were asking me that today before Eidan was returned, and I said, we're taking this 1 minute at a time. We're not taking any chances. And but now that he is safe with his family, you know, we're going to talk to the family and see what they want to do. But we've got residents that want to throw parades, give him keys to the city, name a park after him, all kinds of wonderful things. But it's ultimately going to be up to Eidan and his family in terms of what we do for a celebration.
Yeah, and remember, it was just weeks ago that everybody feared the worst. That was what the last time his father was on this show, was when the Hamas said, "Oh, we've lost track of him." Everybody feared the worst at that point.
Well, that's correct, and it happened again today for a little while. At one point, Hamas had said they had turned Eidan over to the Red Cross, and then the Red Cross announced they didn't have him. So everyone was holding that collective breath about what's really going on here. Is this going to be another major disappointment? And whatever it was, but in the end, it was, you've seen the reunion of Edon and his family. It's so joyous.
Yeah, I don't know anybody who can watch that without getting a tear in their eye. I know I did, and I've seen it about 3 times now.
Right.
So the party continues in Tenafly here. People are still going strong and are going to watch the Knicks game because apparently Edon was a huge Knicks fan, or is a huge Knicks fan, and the Knicks have a big game tonight.
That's correct. We a resident from a neighboring town donated their jumbotron, which is like 60 feet by 30 feet. So we've got this big festival going on right now, and everyone's out there enjoying the Knicks game, and just very grateful.
All right. Well, Mayor Mark Zinna, thank you so much. And we will be in touch about the celebration welcoming Edon home. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. Coming
Thank you.
up for us. Chris Cuomo was talking to TMZ founder Harvey Levin about the first day of the Diddy trial. He'll join me live with a preview next. All right, Chris Cuomo joins me now. And Chris, you're going to be talking to TMZ founder Harvey Levin about the Sean Combs trial. Harvey Levin hosts the podcast that Mark Garagos got in trouble with the judge because he was on that podcast calling the prosecution team a 6-pack of white women, I think is how he put it.
Yeah, I don't know that it's trouble. And if it is, it's good trouble, because I don't know how Garagos can be censured when they're clearly outside attorneys having influence on the other side of the bench also. I mean, to me, this is one of those gotcha moments that is actually a nice lens into the reality of litigation. You know, all these people who find, you know, they find clients who can be like lotto tickets for them, and they become an adjunct of the prosecution.
The attorney in Texas representing all the civil lawsuits?
Well, he's just one gross example of it, right? You know, in terms of volume, gross that way.
I mean, I'm not judging
or
something. It's
the
crazy.
allegations.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying, you know, on a volume basis, let's say. So I don't think he's a problem. I have Harvey on because Harvey is a talented legal analyst also. He's got a legal background, and he understands the different dynamics of this case, and he's going to be helpful.
All right. Well, Chris, it's all yours. Take it away.